Hello there, my name is Randy Helm and welcome back. Today we are on part 3 of a 3-part series. If you haven't watched parts 1 and 2 yet, I suggest you pause this video and go watch those first. It'll make more sense. We're going through the process of creating projected financial statements. Now if you're ready, let's begin. The next thing I want to look at is term debt. Now if your company took out a loan, either with a bank or with a friend or relative, you should put it in here. Let's put in here that we borrowed $350,000. Let's go ahead and leave that at 7% interest rate. Let's assume it's for 10 years instead of 5 years. And let's say instead of the loan starting on December 31st of 2020, let's change that to May 15th of 2019. So that's going to carry forward into our financial forecast in terms of what our loan balances will be and what our interest expense is going to be. So the next section I have is equity. And often there's not a lot done with this section. The first here section, common stock and additional paid-in capital. Now, depending on the structure of your company, the labels may be a little different, not to be alarmed. But these first two sections really only change if you are going to sell more shares of your company or you're going to buy out somebody. For instance, let's say you've got a friend who really wants to become an owner of your company, so you're going to take on a new partner. You might consider adding numbers to this. Otherwise, just leave it steady. Now this section here is where you would want to put owner draws or dividends, whatever you want to call it for your entity. So you can see that in the previous 3 years, we've had some owner draws, $10,000, $12,000, and $10,000 again. What are the projections going to be for the next 3 years? Maybe it's 0. Maybe we're going to do $10,000 a year. Let's go ahead and do $5,000, $10,000, and maybe we'll do $15,000 just to see how things shake out. All right, my next tab that I have is on capital expense. This top section is where you would put in assumptions about some of your assets that you're going to dispose of or sell in the next few years. Often, people do not put that in their projections unless they have something planned that is significant. So for now, I'm just going to leave these at 0. But if you were to plan something, you'd want to estimate, well, how much do you think you're going to sell it for? And what was the original cost and how much depreciation has been accumulated up to that point for those assets. If you're going to buy new assets, that goes down here. I even have a little note here for myself, new purchases. So maybe next year we don't buy anything, but the year after that, we're going to buy $15,000 worth of product. Maybe it's a new computer, maybe it's office equipment. I need to make assumptions about what depreciation is going to happen for the assets that we already have. A safe bet is to use the rate that you have been recording for the previous years. Unless you know specifically about how your assets are flowing, what rate they have been depreciating at, if you don't know all that stuff, it's safer to just leave it as what the historical number has been. Now, your new assets are also going to depreciate. So that's what this little box down here is for. And what it's saying is that in the previous 3 years, the depreciation expense has been about 5.5 to 6.5% of the cost of the assets. And I'm going to assume that pattern will continue in the future. So I'm going to leave this box as 6.2% because that's what the number was for the most recent year. I could change that to maybe 7%, or I could drop it lower. I'm just going to leave it at 6.2 for now. So now we've entered in our historical data. We've entered in our general assumptions. And we've made some assumptions about term debt, equity, capital expenditures. Let's take a look at what our results are. Let's go to the balance sheet. And this is what we get. We can see that the cash in the bank, it's $182,000 for 2023, $253,000 for the next year, and $350,000 for the year after that. That looks great. It's moving in the right direction. Now you can also go through all the other lines to see if anything doesn't look right to you. Does it pass the sniff test? If something looks goofy, you may need to go into the assumptions and tweak some of the formulas. Now let's look at your income statement. So as I mentioned before, we have 3 years of actual data and 3 years of the projections. So we can see that our sales for 23 is about 977,000. Then it goes to 1,055,000, and then it goes to 1,000,001. Our net income in 22, our net income was 68,000. But we're projecting that in the next year it'll be 82,000, and then 103,000, and then 117,000. Again, you can go through this line by line to see if everything seems to make sense with what you know and what you expect. Your payroll expense is growing, your rent is holding steady, your CAMs are growing. So now let's go to the statement of cash flows and see what that tells us. So we have 2 years of actual data and 3 years of projections. Now you might wonder, why are we only showing 2 years of actuals when the balance sheet and the income statement pages had 3 years of actuals? So that's because to calculate much of the cash flow statement, you need to compare 2 years against each other. And so if you have 3 years of data, you can only get 2 years of cash flow statements. Regardless, we have the projections for the next 3 years. You can see that we have our net income in there, and we can see that the cash flow from operations is looking pretty healthy. For 21 and 22, the cash flow from operations was at 87,000 and then 96,000. And we're projecting that it's going to grow to 105 for the next year, then 131, and then 149. Great. And you can see the cash flow from investments that in 2024, cash is going down by $15,000 because of the equipment that we purchased or we are planning to purchase in that year. The next section shows cash flow from financing. This really is where you have the impact of borrowing more money or paying down on your debt. Or you can see here the payments to the owners, where we put in that in 23 we're paying out $5,000, in 24 we're paying $10,000, and then $15,000 the year after that. Now let's take a look at the ratios real quick. Now some people don't take the time to calculate their ratios when they're putting together their projections, but they should. You want to see if things are looking strong, if there's any red flags. If you are borrowing money from your bank, they're going to be very interested in your ratios, especially your current ratio. Now, you may have a covenant with your bank that says your current ratio cannot go below a certain number. So you'd want to look, does it go below that number? I've seen covenants that have been stated that you cannot have the current ratio go below 1.0. All right. Well, we would want to look in this case, are we ever close to 1.0 that we would be in violation of those covenants? And in this case, we're not. But those are the kind of things you'd want to look for. Just to recap what we did here. We took a set of financial statements, input them into a forecasting template, and created forecasted financials for the next 3 years. This part of the forecasting process is not that hard if you have the right tools for the job. In the real world, the majority of your time should be spent on having the discussions about where do you see the company going in the next few years and how are you going to get it there. That is the important part. If you focus too much on the Excel parts, you are missing the point. If you use a forecasting template like I showed you, then you can focus your time on what will make a difference. If you would like a copy of my template, look in the description down below, and there's a link where you can access it. Also, please subscribe to this channel and ring the bell if you want notified of future videos. Thank you and have a nice day.